The vampire king found his maid weeping at his dead son's grave, clutching a toy that had been buried 3 years ago. She ran before he could demand answers. What he discovered in the hidden village that night shattered everything he thought he knew about loyalty, loss, and the traitor still living in his palace. The cemetery gates never made a sound when Ravel pushed them open. They couldn't. He'd had them oiled every week for the past 3 years, since the night his son was buried. Tonight, like every anniversary, the vampire king came alone.
No guards, no ceremony.
Just a father and the stone that marked where his child should have been sleeping. The moon hung low and fat above the royal tombs, casting silver across the marble monuments. Ravel's boots crunched on gravel as he walked the familiar path, past the graves of queens and warriors, toward the smallest headstone in the entire cemetery. Prince Kale Driven.
Belovedson.
The stars took him too soon. Ravel stopped 3 paces from the grave. Someone was already there. A figure knelt in the grass, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Small hands pressed against the cold stone. In the moonlight, Ravel recognized the simple gray dress, the dark braid falling down her back.
Aria.
One of the palace maids.
His jaw tightened.
He'd given strict orders. No one visited this grave except him.
No flowers. No prayers.
No witnesses to his grief. Yet here she was, weeping over his son's tomb as if her heart was being torn in half. Ravel moved like smoke. One moment, he stood in shadow. The next, he was directly behind her. Explain yourself. Aria gasped and spun, nearly falling backward. Her face was streaked with tears, eyes red and swollen. For a heartbeat, she stared at him in pure terror. Then she scrambled to her feet and dropped into a deep bow. Your Majesty, I didn't know you would come so early. That isn't an answer. Ravel's voice cut like frost. Why are you here? I was cleaning the graves, my lord. It's part of my duties. Don't lie to me. He stepped closer and she flinched. The graveyard staff tends these tombs. Kitchen maids don't come here. Especially not at midnight. Especially not to cry over a child you never met. Her breath hitched. She wiped her face quickly, but the tears kept coming.
I'm sorry.
I'll leave. I won't come back. She turned to flee, but something slipped from her grip and hit the grass with a soft thud. Both of them froze. Ravel looked down. A small wooden dragon lay in the grass. Hand-carved, painted gold with tiny ruby eyes. One of the wings was chipped from years of play. The world seemed to stop spinning. Ravel knew that toy. He'd commissioned it himself 4 years ago for Kale's 8th birthday. His son had carried it everywhere, tucked it under his pillow at night, brought it to meals, held it during thunderstorms. It had been buried with him. Where did you get that? Ravel's voice was barely a whisper now, but somehow more dangerous than a shout. Aria's face went white. She bent down, snatched the dragon, and clutched it to her chest. I found it. In the palace. I thought. That dragon was placed in my son's coffin. Ravel's eyes locked onto hers, glowing faintly in the darkness. I watched them seal the tomb myself. So I'll ask you one more time, and if you lie, I'll know.
Where
did you
get that?
Her lips trembled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. For a moment, she looked like she might confess everything. Then her expression changed. Hardened, like a mother protecting something precious. I have to go, she whispered. Before Ravel could react, she turned and ran. She was human, but fear made her fast. She sprinted through the cemetery gates and disappeared into the dark forest path that led back to the palace. Ravel didn't chase her. Not yet. He stood in the moonlight, staring at the small grave, his mind racing. That dragon had been buried 3 years ago. He'd seen it himself, clutched in his dead son's hands. The tomb had never been opened. The seals were intact. He checked them every month. So how did a palace maid have it? Unless...
No. Impossible.
But the way she'd cried, the way she'd held that toy like it was the most precious thing in the world, the way she'd looked at him, not with the guilty expression of a thief, but with the fierce desperation of someone protecting a secret worth dying for. Ravel's hands curled into fists. 3 years ago, his son had collapsed during dinner. Poison, the healers said. By the time Ravel reached the boy's room, Cale's lips were already blue. His heartbeat had been gone, his small body cold. Ravel had screamed until his voice shattered. He'd torn apart the palace searching for the assassin. He'd executed 12 suspects. He'd buried his only child and sworn vengeance on a killer he never found. But what if the story he'd been told was a lie? What if someone had saved Cale that night and hidden him? What if his son was still alive? The thought was too painful to hold, too dangerous to hope for. But that wooden dragon was real, and Aria's tears were real. And tomorrow, Ravel would find out the truth, even if he had to tear the entire kingdom apart to do it. He looked down at the grave one last time, then turned and walked back toward the palace, his shadows stretching long and dark across the stones. Behind him, the moon shone down on the small headstone, illuminating the name of a prince who might not be dead after all. Ravel didn't sleep that night. He stood at his chamber window watching the sky fade from black to gray, his mind replaying every detail of the encounter at the cemetery. The wooden dragon, Aria's tears, the way she'd run like someone with everything to lose. By the time the sun rose, hidden behind thick curtains to protect him from its burn, he'd made his decision. He would watch her, follow her, learn what she was hiding. And if his son was truly alive, heaven help anyone who'd kept that secret from him. The morning bell rang through the palace. Servants scattered to their duties like ants. Ravel moved through the corridors silently, his presence making guards stiffen and maids drop into nervous curtsies. But he wasn't interested in them. He found Aria in the West Wing, carrying a breakfast tray toward the guest chambers. Her face was carefully blank, eyes downcast, posture perfect. She looked like every other servant in the palace. Except her hands trembled slightly when she gripped the tray. Ravel stayed back, hidden in an alcove, and simply observed. She delivered the meal, collected empty dishes from another room, and began her walk back toward the kitchens. Her path would take her directly past the prince's old chambers. Ravel watched. As Aria approached the closed door, the one with Cale's name still carved into the wooden frame, her step slowed. Her breathing changed. She stared at that door for 3 full seconds, her knuckles white around the dish tray. Then she turned sharply and took a longer route, walking an extra corridor just to avoid passing it. Interesting. An hour later, Ravel attended his council meeting. The same tedious reports about taxes and border patrols. His advisors droned on while he pretended to listen. Aria entered to refill the wine. She moved efficiently, professionally, eyes on her work. But when Lord Valen, Ravel's oldest and most trusted advisor, mentioned the prince's death in passing, suggesting they finally convert his chambers into a library, Aria's hand jerked. Wine sloshed over the rim of the goblet. Clumsy girl, Valen snapped. Forgive me, my lord. Aria's voice was steady, but her face had gone pale. She set down the pitcher with shaking hands and began dabbing at the spill with a cloth. Ravel said nothing, just watched. The way her jaw clenched, the way she kept her eyes fixed on the table, refusing to look at anyone, the way her breath came a little too fast. This wasn't the nervousness of a servant afraid of punishment. This was grief, raw and fresh, as if Cale had died yesterday instead of 3 years ago. When she finished cleaning and hurried out, Ravel noticed something else. A small bulge in her apron pocket, roughly the size of a wooden dragon. She was carrying it with her, keeping it close. The behavior of someone who loved that toy, who couldn't bear to be parted from it. The behavior of a mother. Ravel dismissed the council early, ignoring their confused protests. He had more important matters to attend to. He spent the rest of the day tracking Arya's movements through the palace. She worked hard, scrubbing floors, changing linens, serving meals. Nothing unusual. But she never smiled, never spoke unless spoken to. And she avoided the prince's old wing entirely, taking ridiculous detours to stay away from those corridors. More than that, she kept touching her apron pocket,
Checking it.
making sure the dragon was still there. By evening, Ravel's patience was wearing thin. He needed answers, not observations. As dusk settled over the palace, he positioned himself in the servants' quarters, hidden in shadow, and waited. An hour after sunset, Arya emerged from her small room. She'd changed out of her uniform into a simple brown cloak. She carried a small basket and moved with purpose, glancing over her shoulder every few steps. She wasn't going to the kitchens or the supply rooms. She was leaving the palace. Ravel followed. Arya slipped out through the servants' gate, the one that led into the eastern gardens. From there, she took a narrow path into the forest, a route most humans would never risk at night. But she moved through the darkness like someone who'd walked this path 100 times before. Ravel stayed back, his vampire senses allowing him to track her easily. He could hear her heartbeat, quick and nervous. Smell the herbs in her basket. See her clearly even in the deep shadows between trees. She walked for nearly an hour, moving deeper into the woods, farther from the palace. The trees grew thicker. The path became barely visible. Where was she going? Then, through the branches ahead, Ravel saw lights. Not torches or lanterns. Soft, warm firelight coming from windows. A village. A small human settlement, hidden so deep in the forest that even Ravel hadn't known it existed. Maybe a dozen cottages clustered together, smoke rising from chimneys, the smell of cooking meat and bread drifting on the air. Arya walked straight toward one of the cottages, her pace quickening. Ravel crept closer, moving from shadow to shadow, until he could see through a window. Arya pushed open the door and stepped inside. An old woman looked up from her knitting, smiling. And then a child's voice, bright and joyful, rang out.
Mana.
You're home. Ravel's heart stopped. A boy ran into view, maybe 11 years old. Silver hair that caught the firelight. Eyes that glowed like moonlight. The same eyes Ravel saw in the mirror every day. The same eyes that had looked up at him 3 years ago and whispered, Papa, I'm scared. His son, Kale, was alive. Ravel couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stare through that window at the impossible. His son, his beautiful, precious son, was alive. The boy launched himself at Arya, wrapping thin arms around her waist. She caught him, holding him tight, pressing her face into his silver hair. The old woman smiled and returned to her knitting, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. As if a dead prince coming home to his mother was just another evening. I missed you, Mama, the boy said, his voice muffled against Arya's cloak. Gran made stew, but it's not as good as yours. My stew is perfectly adequate. Thank you very much, the old woman said tartly, but her eyes were warm. Arya laughed, actually laughed, and the sound pierced Ravel's chest like a blade. He'd never heard her laugh before. In the palace, she was silent as a ghost. Here, she was radiant. I'm sure it's wonderful, Mother Iris. Arya set the basket on the table and began unpacking it. Bread from the palace kitchens.
Cheese.
Apples. A small cloth bag that jingled with coins. But Aaron has high standards.
Eren.
Not Kale. She'd changed his name. The boy, Aaron, pulled away and immediately started telling Arya about his day. Something about catching frogs in the stream and learning to carve wood from the village carpenter. He spoke quickly, excitedly, hands gesturing wildly. And Ravel memorized every detail. The way his son's nose crinkled when he smiled. The gap where he'd lost a tooth. The small scar on his chin that hadn't been there 3 years ago.
He was taller now. thinner.
His face had lost its baby softness. But it was him. Absolutely, undeniably him. Did you bring it? Aaron asked suddenly, bouncing on his toes. The dragon? You said you'd bring it back today. Arya reached into her pocket and pulled out the wooden toy. Aaron's face lit up like the sun. I left it at Papa's grave, Arya said softly, placing it in his hands. To keep him company. But I knew you'd want it back.
Papa esse grave.
The words hit Ravel like a physical blow. She told his son that he was dead. Aaron clutched the dragon to his chest, his excitement dimming. Do you think Papa knows I'm okay? Wherever he is? Arya knelt down, cupping the boy's face in her hands. I think he knows. And I think he's proud of you. You're so brave, little star. I wish I could tell him myself, Aaron whispered. I wish I could say goodbye properly. Arya's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. I know, sweetheart. I know. Ravel's hands clenched at his sides. His claws extended, digging into his palms hard enough to draw blood. Every instinct screamed at him to burst through that door, to grab his son, to take him home where he belonged. But something held him back. The way Aaron looked at Arya, the complete trust, the love. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't playing a role. She was his mother in every way that mattered. And Ravel was a stranger. A dead man in his son's mind. Mother Iris served dinner. They ate together at the small table, talking and laughing. Aaron told a story about a village boy who'd challenged him to a climbing contest. Arya teased him about his messy hair. The old woman complained about her aching joints. It was painfully, beautifully ordinary. The life Kale should have had in the palace. The childhood that had been stolen from him. Except he seemed happy. There was no fear in his eyes. No looking over his shoulder. No guards or tutors or suffocating protocol. Just a boy eating stew with his family, safe and warm and loved. After dinner, Arya tucked Aaron into bed in the cottage's tiny back room. Ravel crept around to that window, watching through a gap in the curtains. Tell me the star story, Aaron asked, snuggling under worn blankets. Arya sat on the edge of the bed, brushing silver hair from his forehead. Again? You've heard it 100 times. I like it, she smiled. Once upon a time, there was a little star who fell from the sky. He was lost and scared, far from home. But a kind woman found him and kept him safe, and loved him like he was her own light.
Her voice was soft, melodic.
Aaron's eyes began to drift closed. The star wanted to go home, Arya continued. But home wasn't safe anymore. Bad people lived there. People who wanted to put out his light forever. So the woman hid him away, where the darkness couldn't find him. And every night, she whispered to the sky, promising his real family that she'd keep him safe until the darkness was gone. Aaron was asleep now, breathing deep and even. Arya leaned down and kissed his forehead. I promise, little star, she whispered. I'll keep you safe, even if it costs me everything. She stood, wiped her eyes, and left the room. Ravel remained at the window, staring at his sleeping son.
Arya identi kidnapped Kael.
She'd saved him. From assassins. From poison. From people in the palace who wanted him dead. People who were still there. Still waiting. Still dangerous. And if Ravel brought his son home now, if he revealed the truth before finding the killers, they would finish what they'd started 3 years ago. His hands trembled with rage. Someone in his court had tried to murder his child. And Ravel was going to find out who. Then he would make them beg for the mercy of death. Ravel waited in the shadows until Mother Iris went to bed. Until the cottage fell silent except for the crackling fire and Aaron's soft breathing from the back room. Then he knocked on the door. 3 measured taps that shattered the peaceful quiet. Inside, he heard Arya gasp. Footsteps. Frantic whispers. Then silence. He knocked again. I know you're awake, Arya, he said, keeping his voice low, controlled. And I know my son is in there. Open the door.
Now.
A long pause. Then the bolt slid back. Arya stood in the doorway, a kitchen knife trembling in her hand. Her face was white but determined. Behind her, Mother Iris had positioned herself in front of the hallway to Aaron's room, holding a fire poker. Two human women, armed with kitchen implements, ready to fight a vampire king. It would have been laughable if it weren't so desperately brave. "You can't have him," Arya said, her voice shaking. "I don't care what you do to me. You can't take him." Ravel looked at her. Really looked at her. The terror in her eyes wasn't for herself. It was for Kale. "I'm not here to take him," Ravel said quietly. "I'm here for the truth. All of it. And you're going to tell me everything, or I swear I will tear this kingdom apart until I find the answers myself." Arya's knife lowered slightly. You're not taking him back to the palace." "Not until I know it's safe." Ravel stepped inside and closed the door behind him. 3 years ago, I buried my son. Tonight, I find him alive, hidden in the forest, calling you mother. So you're going to explain. Every detail. Starting now." They sat at the small table. Mother Iris made tea with shaking hands, though none of them drank it. Arya stared at the cup in front of her, gathering her courage. Then she began to speak. 3 years ago, I was assigned to the prince's chambers," she said softly. "I served his meals, changed his linens, kept his room clean.
He was
kind to me, always said thank you, always smiled. Most nobles don't even see servants as people, but Prince Kale did." Ravel's chest tightened at the name.
His real name.
That night, the night of the dinner, I was bringing fresh towels to his room. I heard voices inside. Lord Valen and another man I didn't recognize. They were talking about timing, about making sure the dose was strong enough. Her hands clenched around the cup. They said the prince had to die during dinner, in front of everyone, so there would be no doubt. Ravel went very still. Valen, his most trusted advisor, the man who'd stood beside him for 20 years, who'd helped him search for the assassin, who'd attended Kale's funeral and offered condolences. Valen had ordered his son's murder. I didn't know what to do, Arya continued, her voice breaking. If I told someone, they might not believe me. Or worse, they might be part of it. So I waited. I watched. And during dinner, I saw Lord Valen's servant add something to the prince's wine. "Why didn't you come to me?" Ravel's voice was harsh. "Because I didn't know if I could trust you." Arya's eyes flashed with sudden fire. "For all I knew, you were part of it. Maybe you wanted a different heir. Maybe you'd grown tired of your son. I'd seen nobles do worse for power." The words stung, but Ravel couldn't deny their logic. Trust no one, especially in a palace full of vipers. "The prince collapsed," Arya whispered. Everyone panicked. They carried him to his chambers. The healers came. They said he was dying, that the poison had stopped his heart. She looked up at Ravel, tears streaming down her face. "But I've been reading your library books, studying herbs and medicines, and I recognized the poison. It was nightshade bloom. It mimics death but doesn't always kill. Not immediately." Ravel leaned forward. "You saved him. I gave him dreamroot extract. It's a sleeping potion that slows the heart even more, makes the body cold as ice. To everyone else, it looked like he died. The healers pronounced him dead. You," her voice cracked. "You held him and screamed, and I wanted to tell you so badly. But I couldn't. Not with Valen standing right there, watching. So, you let me believe my son was dead." The words came out flat.
Hollow.
"I let you grieve," Arya said firmly, "so your son could live. That night, after everyone left, I went to the tomb. I had 2 hours before the dreamroot wore off. I broke the seal, took Kale, and ran. Mother Iris is my aunt. She helped me hide him here. We changed his name, cut his hair, told him his father died protecting him from bad people. And you've been visiting his grave," Ravel said slowly, to maintain the illusion. "Every week. I leave flowers. I mourn. So if anyone is watching, they'll think I'm just an overly sentimental maid who cared for the prince she met his eyes. The assassins needed everyone to believe he was dead. So that's what I gave them. Mother Iris spoke for the first time. The girl gave up everything. Her life. Her future. She could never marry, never have her own children. Because raising your son became her entire world. Ravel looked at Arya. This small, quiet maid who'd outsmarted assassins and saved his heir. Valen is still in my court, he said softly. Still trusted. Still close to me. I know, Arya's voice hardened. And if you bring Kale back before Valen is dealt with, he'll finish what he started. Ravel stood. Then I'll deal with him. But I need your help.
Arya blinked.
My help. You're going back to the palace tomorrow. And you're going to be my eyes and ears. Because Valen isn't working alone. Ravel's smile was cold and deadly. And before this is over, I'm going to find every single person who tried to take my son from me. Ravel returned to the palace before dawn, his mind sharper than it had been in 3 years. His son was alive. That changed everything. But Valen couldn't know. No one could know. The moment word spread that Prince Kale had survived, the assassins would strike again, and this time, they'd make certain of his death. So Ravel would play the grieving king a little longer. He would smile at Valen, trust him, confide in him, and when the time was right, he would destroy him. The council met at midday. Ravel took his seat at the head of the long table, surrounded by his most trusted advisors. Lord Valen sat to his right, as he had for 2 decades, his expression concerned and attentive. Looking at him now, knowing what he'd done, Ravel wanted to rip his throat out. Instead, he smiled. Lord Valen, I've been thinking about your suggestion. Converting Kale's chambers into a library. Valen's eyes flickered with something. Relief? Satisfaction? Your Majesty, I only meant. It's time, Ravel said, letting just the right amount of weariness into his voice. 3 years is long enough to keep a shrine to grief. My son would want those rooms to be useful again. Around the table, the other council members exchanged glances. Lord Theron, the military commander, nodded approvingly. Lady Sarah, who managed the treasury, looked sympathetic. Captain Aldrich, head of the palace guard, kept his expression neutral. Any one of them could be working with Valen. Or all of them. A wise decision, Your Majesty, Valen said smoothly. Grief is natural, but we must move forward. For the kingdom's sake. Indeed, Ravel let his gaze drift across each face at the table. Though I sometimes wonder if my son's death could have been prevented. If the assassin was closer than we thought. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Your Majesty? Lady Sarah's voice was careful. Forgive me. Old thoughts on a difficult day, Ravel waved his hand dismissively. Lord Theron, tell me about the border patrols. The meeting continued, but Ravel watched. Every expression, every reaction, every tells. Valen remained perfectly composed. Too composed. After the council dispersed, Arya appeared to clean the chamber. She worked silently, wiping down the table, collecting empty glasses. To anyone watching, she was invisible, just another servant doing her job. But as she passed behind Ravel's chair, she whispered, barely audible. Valen met someone in the east corridor last night. Hooded figure. I couldn't see who. Ravel gave no indication he'd heard. Simply stood and walked out. But his mind raced. Valen was still actively conspiring, which meant the threat wasn't over. It had simply been waiting. For what? Over the next 3 days, Ravel and Arya worked in careful silence. She fed him information in passing whispers, stolen moments when no one else was watching. The locations of Valen's secret meetings. The names of servants who carried messages for him. The locked drawer in his office that he checked obsessively. Ravel began his own investigation, moving through the palace like a shadow. He followed Valen to midnight meetings in abandoned wings. He intercepted letters before they reached their destinations. He questioned servants who would never dare lie to their king. A picture emerged. Slowly.
Carefully.
Valen had been planning this for years. Long before Cale's death. He'd built a network of loyalists, minor nobles who felt overlooked, guards who wanted better pay, servants who owed him favors. And his ultimate goal wasn't just to kill the prince. It was to take the throne. But he couldn't challenge Ravel directly. The vampire king was too powerful, too beloved. So Valen had needed the succession line broken first. With Cale dead and no other heirs, Valen could position himself as the natural choice to rule when Ravel eventually stepped down. Or when Valen arranged an accident. The rage that burned in Ravel's chest was cold and patient. He would not strike blindly. He would not give Valen a chance to escape or talk his way out. He would wait for the perfect moment. On the fourth night, Arya came to his chambers after midnight. She shouldn't have been there. Servants didn't visit the king's private rooms, but she slipped in through the servants' passage, her face pale with urgency. "He knows," she whispered. Ravel's blood went cold. What? Not about Aaron. Not exactly. But someone told Valen that a servant has been asking questions. Watching him. He's getting suspicious, her hands twisted in her apron. This morning, he asked me directly if I'd noticed anyone acting strangely. What did you say? That I hadn't. That I barely notice anything beyond my work. She met his eyes. But he didn't believe me. I could see it. He's having me followed now. Ravel cursed under his breath. If Valen grew too suspicious, he might flee. Or worse, he might realize Cale was alive and send assassins to the village. "We're running out of time," Arya said. "If he discovers Aaron, he won't." Ravel's voice was steel. "I'm moving the timeline up. Tomorrow, I'm calling a full royal assembly. Every noble, every council member, every guard captain."
Why?
"Because I'm going to announce that I'm naming a new heir." Arya's eyes widened. "But if you announce Aaron..." "I'm not announcing Aaron," Ravel said. "I'm setting a trap. And Valen is going to walk right into it." He moved to his desk, pulling out parchment and ink. His hand moved quickly, writing orders that would summon the entire court. "Go back to your room," he told Arya. "Pack a bag. Be ready to run if this goes wrong. And if it goes right..." Ravel's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Then tomorrow, your son gets his father back. And I get my justice." Arya nodded and slipped back into the shadows. Ravel looked out his window toward the dark forest, toward the hidden village where his son slept safely. Soon, he thought. Soon, this nightmare would end. One way or another. The storm came without warning. Rain hammered the village like fists against a door, and thunder cracked loud enough to shake the cottage walls. Aaron woke with a gasp, clutching his wooden dragon to his chest. "Mama," he called out. But Arya wasn't there. She'd returned to the palace that morning, as she always did, to maintain the illusion, to keep him safe. Mother Iris appeared in the doorway, holding a candle. "Just a storm, little one. Nothing to fear." Aaron nodded, but he didn't feel comforted. Something felt wrong tonight. The air was too heavy, the darkness too thick. Outside, lightning split the sky. And in that brief flash of white light, Aaron saw a shadow move past the window. Too tall to be Mama. Too quick to be the village carpenter.
Gran, he whispered.
"Someone's outside." Mother Iris went still. She moved to the window, peering through the rain-streaked glass. 3 figures stood at the edge of the tree line, hooded, motionless despite the storm. Watching the cottage. "Get under the bed," Mother Iris said, her voice suddenly hard.
"Now, Aaron."
"Don't come out until I say." "But..." "Now." Aaron scrambled off the bed and squeezed into the narrow space beneath it, his heart pounding. Through the gap, he could see Mother Iris's feet moving quickly around the room, heard her barricading the door, muttering prayers under her breath. Then the front door exploded inward. 3 men burst into the cottage, water streaming from their cloaks. They wore masks, blank, white, expressionless. One carried a sword, another a length of rope. The third held a cloth bag and a small vial. "Where's the boy?" the one with the sword demanded. Mother Iris stood her ground, fire poker raised. "There's no boy here. Just an old woman. You have the wrong house." The man laughed. "We've been watching this place for days, grandmother. We know the maid comes here. We know she brings food and coin. We know she tucks a silver-haired child into bed every night." He stepped closer. "Lord Valen wants that child, dead or alive, though he'd prefer alive. More suffering that way." Aaron's blood turned to ice. They'd found him. After 3 years of hiding, of being careful, of Mama risking everything, they'd found him. "You'll have to kill me first," Mother Iris said. The man shrugged. "That can be arranged." He raised his sword. And then the window shattered. A figure exploded through the glass in a shower of rain and broken shards. It moved too fast to track, one moment airborne, the next standing between Mother Iris and the assassins. Lightning flashed, illuminating the newcomer. Ravel. His eyes glowed crimson in the darkness. His fangs were bared, and his expression was something beyond rage. It was pure, ancient fury. "You made a mistake coming here," he said softly. The assassin with the sword lunged. Ravel caught the blade with his bare hand, snapped it like a twig, and drove the broken end through the man's chest. The assassin collapsed without a sound. The other two attacked together. Ravel was faster. He moved like smoke and shadow, each strike precise and lethal. The second assassin's neck snapped with a sickening crack. The third tried to run, but Ravel caught him by the throat and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack the wood. "Who sent you?" Ravel's voice was barely human now. "Say the name." The assassin clawed at Ravel's hand, choking.
Valen.
"Lord Valen sent us to finish what we started." "How did you find this place?" Followed the maid. Tonight. Ravel's eyes widened. Tonight. They'd followed Arya when she'd left the palace to warn him about Valen's suspicions. Which meant Valen knew about Aaron now. And if these three had found the village, others might be coming. Ravel tightened his grip. How many others? The assassin's eyes rolled back. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then his body went limp. Ravel dropped the corpse and spun toward Mother Iris. "Where's Kale?" "Under the bed," she said, still clutching her fire poker with shaking hands. Ravel crossed the room in 2 strides and dropped to his knees.
Kale.
"It's safe now. Come out." For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, Aaron crawled out from under the bed. He was trembling, eyes wide with terror, silver hair plastered to his forehead. The wooden dragon was still clutched tight in one hand. He looked at Ravel, at this stranger with glowing red eyes and blood on his hands, and Aaron's face crumpled. "I want Mama," he whispered. The words broke something in Ravel's chest. His son didn't know him, didn't recognize him. To Aaron, he was just another monster in the night. Ravel forced his eyes to return to normal, retracted his fangs, made himself look as human as possible. "I know you do," he said gently, "and I'm going to take you to her. But first, we need to leave this place. It's not safe anymore." "Who are you?" Aaron asked, clutching the dragon tighter. Ravel hesitated. He wanted to say it, wanted to pull his son into his arms and tell him everything. But there wasn't time. "A friend of your mother's," he said instead. "Someone who's going to make sure you're never in danger again." Mother Iris stepped forward. "You can trust him, Aaron. I promise." Aaron looked between them, then nodded slowly. Ravel scooped him up, careful, gentle, and wrapped him in a cloak to shield him from the rain. The boy was so light, so fragile. "Hold on tight," Ravel said. Then he ran. Through the storm, through the forest, moving faster than any human could follow. Aaron buried his face against Ravel's shoulder, and Ravel held him close, protecting him from the wind and rain. Behind them, the cottage burned. Valen's assassins might be dead, but others would come. They couldn't go back there. Which meant it was time to end this. Tomorrow, Ravel would spring his trap. And Valen would finally pay for every moment of suffering he'd caused. The throne hall had never been so full. Every noble in the kingdom stood in attendance, dressed in their finest silks and jewels. Council members lined the front rows. Guards positioned themselves along every wall. Servants peered from doorways, whispering behind their hands. The Vampire King had called an emergency assembly, and no one dared miss it. Ravel sat on his throne, perfectly composed, as if he hadn't spent the previous night slaughtering assassins and spiriting his son to a new safe house. Arya stood among the other servants along the side wall, her face carefully blinked despite the fear in her eyes. Aaron was hidden in Ravel's private chambers, guarded by the only two people Ravel trusted completely, his personal guards who'd served his family for generations, who remembered Cale as a baby, and who'd wept at his funeral. Everything was in place. Lord Valen stood at the front of the crowd, his expression curious and attentive. He had no idea 3 of his assassins were dead. No idea his plan had failed. No idea this was his final day breathing. Ravel rose from his throne, and the hall fell silent. 3 years ago, he began, his voice carrying across the vast space, I lost my son. Prince Cale was taken from me by poison, and my world became darkness. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Valen nodded solemnly, playing his part perfectly. Since that day, I have ruled alone, without an heir, without hope for the future. Ravel's gaze swept across the assembly. But a kingdom cannot remain without succession. So today, I make an announcement that will shape our future. Every eye fixed on him. I have decided to name a new heir to the throne. The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Valen's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been alarm. But he recovered quickly, arranging his face into pleased surprise. Your Majesty, Valen said, stepping forward. This is wonderful news. The kingdom needs stability. Who have you chosen? One of the noble families? Perhaps. I haven't decided yet, Ravel interrupted smoothly. That's why I've gathered you all here. To discuss the options. To hear counsel from those I trust most. He descended from the throne, walking slowly down the steps. The crowd parted as he moved among them. Lord Theron, you've served me loyally for 15 years. What do you think makes a worthy heir? The military commander straightened. Strength, Your Majesty. Courage. The ability to protect the kingdom from threats both external and internal. Wise words, Ravel continued walking. Lady Sarah, your thoughts. Intelligence and prudence, Your Majesty. An heir must understand economics, diplomacy, the delicate balance of power. Ravel nodded, moving closer to Valen now, circling him like a predator. And you, old friend? You've been by my side longer than anyone. What qualities should I seek in my new heir? Valen smiled. Loyalty above all, Your Majesty. An heir must be utterly devoted to the crown. Someone who would never betray your trust. Loyalty, Ravel repeated softly.
Yes.
That is the most important quality, isn't it? He stopped directly in front of Valen. Tell me, Lord Valen, what would you do if you discovered someone in this court had betrayed me, had worked against me in secret, had tried to destroy everything I held dear? Valen's smile never wavered. I would see them executed immediately, Your Majesty. Trates de ser no merci.
No merci, Ravel echoed.
How interesting. He turned to address the full assembly. 3 years ago, on the night my son died, I held him in my arms. Do you know what the last thing he said was? The hall was deathly quiet. He said, Papa, the wine tastes funny. Those were his final words before the poison took him. Ravel's voice remained steady, but his eyes had begun to glow. At the time, I was too destroyed by grief to think clearly. But I've had 3 years to remember, to analyze, to investigate. He turned back to Valen. And last night, I learned something fascinating. The assassins who've been hunting in my kingdom, the ones who attacked a small village during a storm, they confessed before they died. Do you know what they told me? Valen's face had gone pale. Your Majesty, I don't understand. They said they were finishing what they started. Ravel stepped closer. Those were their exact words. Finishing what we started, strange phrasing, don't you think? As if the job was never complete. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. The wine tastes funny, Ravel said again, and this time his voice was deadly. That's what my son said. And do you know what the assassin said when he poisoned that wine? I heard it myself 3 years ago, though I didn't recognize its significance. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire hall. He said, "This should finish what we started with the mother." Valen's face went white as marble. Ravel smiled. But my son had no mother. She died in childbirth. So, who are they referring to, Lord Valen? What did you start? And with whom? This is absurd. Valen backed away, but guards had already moved to block the exits. I've served you faithfully for 20 years. You try to kill my son. Ravel's voice exploded through the hall like thunder. You poisoned him because you wanted the throne for yourself. You thought if the heir was dead, you could manipulate your way into power. You have no proof. I have your assassin's confessions. I have witnesses who saw you meeting with them. I have the financial records showing payments to known mercenaries. Ravel's eyes blazed crimson. And most damning of all, I have the servant who heard you planning it. The one who saved my son's life while you tried to take it. Arya stepped forward from the crowd, her chin raised despite her trembling hands. Valen's expression twisted into something ugly. That lying peasant. Guards, Ravel said quietly. Arrest Lord Valen for high treason and attempted murder of the royal heir. 6 guards seized Valen as he tried to run. He struggled, screaming denials and curses, but it was over. The conspiracy had ended. Ravel watched them drag Valen away, then turned to his people. The traitor has been revealed. Justice will be served, his voice softened. And tomorrow I have one more announcement to make. One that will change everything. Dawn broke over the kingdom in shades of gold and rose. Ravel stood on the royal balcony, watching the sun paint the sky, something he rarely did, despite his tolerance for daylight. Today felt different. Today felt like the beginning of something new. Behind him, the throne room filled with people once more. Word had spread through the palace like wildfire. The king had another announcement. Something that would change everything. The crowd buzzed with speculation. Some whispered about a new marriage alliance. Others thought he might abdicate. A few dared to hope for something impossible. Ravel turned from the balcony and walked back inside. Arya stood near the throne, dressed in fresh servant's clothes, her eyes red from crying. She'd spent the previous night in the dungeons, not as a prisoner, but as a witness, giving her full testimony against Valen. The former lord had confessed everything under interrogation. The poison, the conspiracy, the network of assassins he'd maintained for years. The plan to eventually eliminate Ravel himself once the succession was secured. He would be executed at sunset. Publicly. Painfully. But that wasn't what today was about. Today was about restoration. Bring him in, Ravel said quietly. The side door opened. Aaron walked in, flanked by the 2 guards who'd protected him through the night. He looked tiny in the vast throne room, overwhelmed by the marble columns and vaulted ceilings. His silver hair had been washed and combed. Someone had dressed him in simple but fine clothes, not royal attire, not yet, but better than the peasant garments he'd worn in the village. He clutched his wooden dragon against his chest like a shield. When he saw Arya, his face lit up. Nana. He started to run to her, but stopped when he noticed the crowd. Hundreds of eyes staring at him. Nobles whispering. Guards watching. Fear flickered across his young face. Arya knelt down, opening her arms, and Aaron ran to her. She caught him, holding him tight, tears streaming down her cheeks. The crowd's whispers grew louder.
Confused. Shocked.
That silver hair. Those moonlit eyes. The age was right. He'd be 11 now if he'd lived. But it couldn't be. The prince was dead. Ravel stepped forward, and the hall fell silent. 3 years ago, he said, his voice carrying to every corner, my son was poisoned by a traitor in this court. I was told he died. I buried him. I mourned him. He looked at Aaron, and his expression softened in a way no one had seen in years. I was lied to, not by the traitor, but by someone far braver. He gestured to Arya, who still knelt with Aaron in her arms. This woman, this servant, discovered the assassination plot. She had seconds to act. No time to find me, no time to alert guards who might themselves be traitors. So she did the only thing she could. She saved my son's life by faking his death. She stole him away in the night. She hid him, protected him, raised him as her own. Gasps echoed through the chamber. For 3 years, she sacrificed everything. Her freedom, her future, her very identity. She lived a double life, returning to the palace to maintain the illusion, all while keeping my son safe in secret. Ravel's voice grew rough with emotion. She did what I could not. She saw the danger when I was blind to it. She saved the heir to this kingdom when I had already failed him. Aaron looked up at Arya, confused.
Mama?
What's he saying? Arya's hands trembled as she cupped his face.
Aaron, my sweet boy.
There's something you need to know. His name is not Aaron, Ravel said gently, walking closer. Though that name kept him safe, and I will always be grateful for it. He knelt down in front of them, meeting the boy's eyes at his level. Your name is Kale. You are my son, and I am your father. Aaron stared at him.
But
Mama said my papa died. She said bad people hurt him. I know what she told you. And she told you that to protect you, because the bad people were real, and they were looking for you. Ravel's voice broke. I thought I'd lost you forever. But your mama, he glanced at Arya, the woman who saved you, who loved you, who gave up everything for you. She kept you alive when I thought you were dead. Aaron looked between them, his small face scrunched in concentration. You're really my papa? I am.
then,
Why didn't you come find me? The question pierced Ravel's heart. Because I didn't know you were alive, little one. I thought you were gone. And I would have torn the world apart to bring you back if I'd known. Tears welled in Aaron's and Kale's eyes. Are the bad people gone now? Yes, Ravel said firmly. They can never hurt you again. Kale looked at Arya. Is Mama coming home with us? Before Arya could answer, Ravel spoke.
she is.
If she'll agree. He stood and held out his hand to Arya. She stared at it, then at him, confusion and fear warring on her face. You saved my son when I could not, Ravel said. Yours is a loyalty deeper than blood, deeper than duty. You could have asked for gold, for titles, for anything, and instead you asked for nothing. You just loved him. Arya's voice was barely a whisper. I thought you'd punish me. For taking him. For letting you believe. Punish you? Ravel pulled her to her feet, then did something that shocked the entire court. He knelt before her. The vampire king, kneeling before a servant. You gave me back my son, my world, my future. His eyes shone with unshed tears. There is no punishment for that. Only gratitude. Only honor. He looked up at the stunned assembly. Lady Arya, guardian of the prince and protector of the realm, I grant you title, lands, and a permanent place in this court, not as a servant, but as a member of this family. Arya sobbed openly now. I don't want titles. I just want him to be safe. Then we want the same thing. Ravel stood and placed a hand on Kale's shoulder. My son, my heir, home at last. Kale looked at Ravel, then at Arya, then back at Ravel. Can I call you Papa? He asked shyly. Ravel's composure finally broke. He pulled his son into his arms, holding him for the first time in 3 years, and whispered, "You can call me Papa. Today, and every day after." The throne room erupted in cheers. Later, as sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Ravel stood on the balcony again. Kale was beside him, holding his hand. Arya stood on the boy's other side, completing the picture. "What happens now?" Arya asked quietly. Ravel looked at his son, alive, safe, home, and smiled.
Now?
"Now we heal. We rebuild. We live." The kingdom below celebrated into the night. And for the first time in 3 years, the Vampire King's heart was whole.